There's such a misunderstanding of what chronic illness work is and what chronic pain might look like. Chronic pain work is often attributed to an accident or a single injury, while chronic illness is ongoing and there's no cure. And I didn't like that feeling, and I'm very stubborn and determined, and I thought, well, I'm going to make something that instead of a liability, my illness is my superpower. Radical acceptance is not giving up. And it's not saying you're okay with chronic illness or that you're okay with being in this amount of pain. It's just radically acknowledging this is my reality today. It can also be so validating to have a loved one or a family member, even if they don't understand, just say, like, I hear you and I see you're in pain. I believe you. And for doctors, right, it's okay if maybe you don't have the answer. What's the patient experiencing, and can you reflect that back to them, that you do see them and you believe what's happening? I like to remind clients, like, your body is fighting so hard for you. It is still fighting so hard.
Welcome back to Dismantling You. Today we're discussing the emotional impact of chronic illness and the importance of feeling heard and supported on your health journey. I'm joined by Kelsey Bates. She's a licensed mental health counselor and the founder of New York Women's CBT. Kelsey, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
My pleasure. Let's start with what initially drew you to the field of mental health counseling, specifically rehabilitation counseling.
I think there's such a unique blend that rehabilitation counseling offers. I, as a child, was always drawn to working with people with disabilities, students and adults, and did that throughout college and was a teacher for a bit with special education. But I always really wanted to be a therapist, and this really bridged the disability world and the mental health world. So it allows you to work with clients and patients in a way that you have the mental health skill set, but you also understand accommodations and advocacy, which is incredibly important.
Absolutely. How did your training shape your specialization in supporting women with chronic illness and complex medical conditions?
I will say I was very lucky to have a wonderful mentor who, in one of my first jobs after getting my full licensure, you have a few years of work before you can work on your own. And she really helped me understand the foundation for chronic pain work. And there's such a misunderstanding of what chronic illness work is and what chronic pain might look like. So chronic pain work is often attributed to an accident or a single injury, while chronic illness is ongoing and there's no cure. So they have to be treated a little bit differently.
I like the way how you describe that not all symptoms fit in just one box.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you share the catalyst of what led you to form New York Women's CBT?
Yeah, I honestly felt in a 9-to-5 type of position, my body could not keep up. And having chronic illness myself, I have a very dynamic and changing health issue. So some days are better than others, right? And I felt in that space, I was not doing my best work, but I also felt like it was kind of seen as a liability, right? And I didn't like that feeling. And I'm very stubborn and determined. And I thought, well, I'm going to make something that instead of a liability, my illness is my superpower.
I love the fact that this important work grew of an unmet need.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What gaps did you observe in traditional mental health care for women living with chronic health conditions?
I think with well-meaning therapists, if they have an understanding of chronic pain work, there is a lot of central sensitization, it's a tongue twister, issues where, yes, downregulation is a huge part of treating chronic pain, and we have to help you feel more grounded in your body to help turn the pain signals down. However, that can sometimes lead to a misconception of we can fix your pain, right? And for instance, some certain types of pain therapy might feel very strongly that if you do, these grounding exercises or reframe the correct way, like the pain will decrease and disappear. And I think that sets people up for a lot of shame if that doesn't happen for them. So with a chronic illness lens, you're able to accommodate and go with more of a dynamic disability. And I don't think therapists, don't want to learn that. I just think it's a specialty. And if they haven't maybe been exposed to chronic illness with a loved one or have one themselves, it can be really hard to note the difference.
Mm-hmm. What emotional themes commonly arise for women navigating chronic illness?
So many complex emotions. I think such isolation and fear, a lot of fear about the future and anxiety. They don't know if they're going to be able to live out their dreams or start that family or do what they wanted to do with their career. It can be really lonely.
Mm-hmm. And also the feeling like they have to constantly explain themselves. Absolutely. That's impactful. Yeah.
Yes. It can feel, that constant explaining, that medical gaslighting can be a huge part of that as well.
How can chronic illness impact identity, self-trust, and self-control?
With chronic illness, it is an illusion of control gets broken, right? And I think we all have these moments in our life, unfortunately, where something awful happens and you realize that what you can control is limited. We do have things that we can control and work hard at, but there are a lot of things that unfortunately happen and we can't make sense of it. So I think that can really be amplified with this, and that is a big challenge in the work we do.
Why do so many patients with invisible illness feel misunderstood or dismissed by the healthcare system?
I don't think it's the fault of doctors. I think we live in a system, unfortunately, that's a network model that is a 15-minute visit, and they do not have truly the time to deep dive and get curious. And they might be wonderful doctors that say, I don't know, and I'm not sure where to send you. But there is a lack of time for them to deep dive into maybe figuring out who that person could be. So I do think it's a system issue. And there are so many specialists that do become that quarterback. But again, that's usually a private pay model, which excludes people. And on top of that, there's still medical racism, the myth that Black women have a higher pain tolerance, which is not true, and they will really be dismissed by the system as well.
How do you define medical trauma?
I think it's a repeated pain or repeated invasive procedure from which you cannot remove yourself. It can also be a life-threatening procedure or event. But with chronic pain, the threat is within. So there isn't a way to turn that off or to get yourself to a place that feels safer. And that repeated experience makes it more complex.
Absolutely. And I think this is such an important topic because people, they don't realize the negative impact that healthcare experiences can actually have, that emotional, lingering impact on them.
Yeah.
What is medical gaslighting, and why can it be so psychologically harmful?
I think medical gaslighting can be very overt, but it also can be covert. So an overt is, you look fine, or, there's nothing wrong with you, or your blood work is fine. So that means everything's normal. It might be more subtle, right? And sometimes maybe there's comments of, well, is it really that bad? Or, kind of dismissing, right? So I think there's a spectrum. And it can be challenging, again, with the complexity and repeated experiences of having that medical trauma and the gaslighting. It can really hinder patients' trust in themselves.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you define that because it can really erode someone's confidence and even future care. What are signs that someone may be carrying trauma from prior healthcare experiences?
It's a very good question. I see two things happen, and I'll do a brief psychoed on the amygdala. Our amygdala controls our fight or flight, and so our amygdala is always getting the information first, which is good. We want that to happen so we can stay safe. But with repeated trauma, like medical trauma, it starts to be on overdrive, which can lead to that central sensitization also of pain. But I think you tend to see either hypervigilance with that fight or flight response or hypoarousal, which is more of the freeze. So some people might appear very shut down in appointments, tearful, maybe not able to advocate for themselves. And on the flip side, you might be very hyper-aroused, pacing, sweating, dizzy, really feeling more of a panic and anxiety. So both of those could be medical trauma symptoms, but they look very different.
How can patients begin to rebuild trust in their bodies after feeling dismissed or invalidated?
Self-compassion is so important. It's also, I think, it's very hard. We can extend such compassion to other people, but not ourselves. And so that is a muscle that I usually tell my clients, that's our long-term goal. But if that feels hard right now, maybe we can just bridge some dialectical thinking too and grounding, right? So if we can start to help you feel grounded in your body, help you start talking to the amygdala and get into the present, then that's when we can bring some reframing, right, and rational thinking online. When we're in a fight or flight state, our blood flow is not going to the frontal lobe. It is going to there is some, but it's very reduced. So we call it, offline, but it's more complicated. It's still online, but we really need to help people feel safe in their bodies and grounded before we can start reframing and bringing in more flexible thought patterns.
Why is validation such a critical component of healing for individuals living with chronic symptoms?
That isolation piece that is so prevalent. If you're able to meet other people that have chronic illness and just have that understanding of you get it, that can be so validating. It can also be so validating to have a loved one or a family member, even if they don't understand, just say, I hear you and I see you're in pain. I believe you. And for doctors, right, it's okay if maybe you don't have the answer. What's the patient experiencing, and can you reflect that back to them, that you do see them and you believe what's happening?
Feeling believed can change everything, no doubt.
Absolutely.
Some patients have had negative experiences with traditional CBT. Why has CBT sometimes felt invalidating for individuals with chronic illness?
I'm so glad you asked this because I agree. I did not really like CBT that much when I studied it in grad school, and I thought, I don't want to use this because I felt like it was so invalidating for traumatic experiences. However, I will say the third wave model that we can embrace more integratively can help with that validation piece. But if you are, for instance, using very traditional CBT, we use the language an irrational thought will be replaced with a rational thought. And if the irrational thought is, I'm worried I'm going to have to go to the ER again because of a flare, and you've experienced that before, that's actually not irrational, right? That's a trauma response. But I like to use the cognitive processing therapy terminology, which is a form of CBT developed by the VA for PTSD. And they use the term stuck point. So, it's not irrational. There's a reason that you feel this way, and we can validate that. But you're also very stuck, and this thought pattern is not helping you. And we can make it more flexible. We can find a more helpful way to think about this. So I think it honors the trauma that they've experienced without the traditional language that can be really invalidating.
Mm-hmm. What is third wave CBT, and how does it differ from earlier CBT approaches?
Yes. So I'll geek out on my history a little bit. In the 60s, Beck was doing cognitive behavior therapy in its earliest form, and Ellis was doing rational emotive behavior therapy. And so that's a really long time ago. And as medicine evolves, so does therapy. And in the 90s and 2000s, this third wave emerged where people like Stephen Hayes, who made acceptance and commitment therapy, and Linehan, who made DBT, were saying we're missing a huge component of grounding and downregulation and mindfulness. We have to help the clients get into their body too. So I love the third wave approach because we do need flexible thinking, but clients get very frustrated trying to get there if they're not able to downregulate first because our frontal lobe is not getting as much blood flow. Right. So there's really a physiological component as well that I like to educate my clients on, that there's nothing wrong with you, that this is hard. We need to go in a different order. But I love that the third wave approach was more inclusive, and it doesn't say that reframing isn't helpful. It absolutely is. But these other mindful and grounding exercises are too.
How do acceptance and commitment therapy ACT principles help patients live meaningful lives even when symptoms persist?
When I talk about radical acceptance, I usually have to preface it with this is a journey. This is not an on-off switch. It's not that one day you're going to feel accepting. And radical acceptance, I also have to do a lot of defining what it is not. Radical acceptance is not giving up. And it's not saying you're okay with chronic illness or that you're okay with being in this amount of pain. It's just radically acknowledging this is my reality today. And you can break it down today, just for the next hour, just for the next 5 minutes. And we'll bring that dialectics of two things can be true. What are the committed actions that you're taking that are getting you to more stability? I often find the clients I'm working with are not taking into account all of the committed actions they're taking, like going to PT, taking their medication, doing their stretches and exercises. Those things really matter, and they're really important committed actions that add up over time. So radical acceptance is a dialectical experience where you're radically acknowledging where your body is and also taking action where you can.
I love that focus, helping people stay connected to their values even though they may not feel good physically.
Yeah.
What unique mental health challenges do you see in women living with endometriosis or chronic pelvic pain?
Chronic pelvic pain conditions still have, I think, such a stigma. I feel we've moved past a lot of that with some amazing psychoeducation and advocacy. However, it's a lot easier to talk about than, a broken arm. It's a lot harder to talk about than a broken arm. It's taboo, right? In many cultures or families, it's uncomfortable to talk about. And it's also this invisible, dynamic, changing pain or disability. So I think that isolation can be incredibly challenging. That can lead to a lot of anxiety and fear about the future. And because we're dealing with reproductive organs and sexual intimacy, this can impact romantic relationships or fear about fertility. So it starts to impact the whole scope of a person's life.
How can patients cope with unpredictable symptoms like flare-ups or limitations in daily functioning?
I think dialectical tools, DBT tools, are so incredibly helpful for this because I like to have my clients make a distress tolerance menu, and we print it out and they fill it out and it goes on the fridge. And basically you are identifying what are the tools and a low pain, a medium pain, or high pain day that you can use to ride the wave. And these are going to span from, medical, interventions, rescue meds, heating pad, cold packs, for maybe more severe, hard, high pain days, to maybe playlists or soothing sensory experiences like a bath, tapping into all of the senses to help downregulate. But I like putting it on paper also when the client is feeling like they're in that window of tolerance where they feel the most stable, because it's such mental load when that happens to remember what tools you do have. So if you can take out the mental load and you just look at a list and pick one, that's a very tangible way of helping yourself get that flare under control in that emotional sense.
How can partners, family members, and friends better support someone navigating chronic illness?
I do love, since I say put that distress tolerance menu on the fridge, if you have a loved one that lives with you, that way they can see it, and then you can discuss how do you communicate to your loved one or your mom or family member that where you are. And maybe it's just simple as, where are you, low, medium, or high? You can say it. And then maybe on some of those things, you even highlight, like, what are the things someone can bring to you? Conversely, like, what are the things you need extra help with during that time can also be added to that list. So maybe that's not the night you can make dinner, and maybe that's the night that you got to order in. And just being very, I think, transparent, as clear as possible, can help also the family members feel empowered. Because I see that a lot, that spouses, loved ones, parents, they really want to help and they don't know how. So if we can make it clear and concrete, that goes a long way.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that, loved ones truly want to be supportive, but they may not necessarily know what to say or do.
Absolutely.
How does living with chronic illness impact the emotional experience of trying to conceive?
I think any chronic illness makes you have different discussions about what does it look like to be a parent and what kind of help are you going to need. And living with a dynamic, changing disability, you might need different help. You might need more help. And that is something that can be really painful to think about or talk about. It's also really healthy to have those discussions. And there are some chronic illnesses like endometriosis that do directly impact fertility. And so there's another layer on top of that of the anxiety of, am I going to be able to have a baby? Am I going to be able to start my family?
What psychological stressors are common among patients navigating both infertility and chronic health conditions?
I think a lot of medical burnout is so common because you just think about how many appointments occur with chronic illness alone. IVF is so many appointments. And there's a real lack of control, I think, that I see of, you can't really control your calendar. You're kind of just surrendering to the process. So medical burnout is so incredibly common. And with that, self-compassion as much as possible and taking breaks, pacing when you can, those things go a long way because it is quite overwhelming.
Yes, and I was just going to add that feeling of navigating multiple unknowns, that is just so overwhelming, no doubt.
Yes, because you're lacking control in all fronts.
Absolutely. How can the uncertainty of fertility treatments amplify the uncertainty already present in chronic illness?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no guarantee, I think, with fertility treatments at times, which is really scary, just like there's maybe no guarantee of stability, but there's a lot of hope. So I think balancing those two things are really hard, but helpful. And if you can acknowledge, again, that kind of dialectical experience of, I'm feeling so overwhelmed and uncertain, scared, anxiety, and, all of the conflicting emotions, and what are those things that you're doing you're doing everything that's in your control. And you're going to see the specialists you need to see. And even though there are no guarantees, what you can control, you are doing.
How can patients cope with the feeling that their body is working against them?
There is a newer to me experience that I've been using of body forgiveness. And I really like this. It's more of an experiential guided meditation where you're allowing these dialectical feelings to come up of maybe you're very angry at your body and you feel like your body's betrayed you. And you're also zooming out and able to see what is your body still doing for you. And I can't overstate, the activities of daily living that we might take for granted, like, toileting independently, showering, brushing our teeth, making ourselves breakfast. These things are essential and so critical. And it's easy to overlook those because we do take them for granted if we're able to do them. So those things we can recognize, but we can also recognize bigger things that your body is doing. And I like to remind clients, like, your body is fighting so hard for you. Yeah. It is still fighting so hard.
Yeah. How can mental health support improve resilience throughout fertility treatments?
I think that having an hour every week that you don't have to take care of someone else's reaction or feelings. Like, you don't have to make your therapist feel better about another negative test or a failed transfer, right? Like, this is just your time. I think there's so much mental load that you're carrying because you have other people in your life, a partner, your family that are wanting these things to happen for you too. You might feel like you have to manage their expectations, and that can feel really overwhelming. So this is a time that is dedicated just for you to feel however you want to feel.
How can patients practice self-compassion when timelines do not unfold as expected?
I hear this a lot of feeling left behind. Maybe you're feeling left behind your friends that have started their families or your own. We all have, goals and our own timeline that we maybe think about and hope for things to happen. So it's easy to self-down. But with self-compassion, inviting that wise mind in of it's okay that this feels awful. You're allowed to feel awful about it, and you're allowed to grieve. And look at how much you're doing to make this happen, to make your family happen, and honoring both of those things, that you're allowed to, feel sad that you feel left behind, and it doesn't mean it won't happen for you.
I love that. Just mentioning that timelines are not a reflection of your self-worth is so important.
Absolutely. Switching
gears, let's do some rapid fire.
Yeah.
One mindset shift that helps patients feel more empowered.
One small thing every day adds up to a big change.
A simple daily practice that supports nervous system regulation.
Bilateral stimulation.
A book that has influenced your therapeutic approach.
The Reality Slap by Russ Harris.
I'll have to check that out.
It's great.
Something you wish more physicians understood about chronic illness.
It's okay if you don't have the answer. And saying that is not a reflection on your knowledge.
One myth about chronic pain you would love to demystify.
You can't have a good life with chronic pain. You absolutely can. That's the myth. I don't want that to be the thought anymore.
That's such an important distinction for people to understand. Because this podcast focuses on dismantling limiting beliefs, what is one belief you personally had to dismantle in your own life or career?
I think I've had to accommodate myself the way I encourage my clients to accommodate themselves. And I had to let go of maybe what I thought my private practice would look like. And for instance, I accommodate myself with telehealth because I can be the best version of me as a therapist, as a partner, a wife, and dog mom. And that allows me to show up for my clients too.
Good for you. Now, what does self-care realistically look for you nowadays?
Right. It's not the facials, even though those are fun. It's absolutely, for me, my PT is non-negotiable every day, and eating foods that are nourishing. I cook, anti-inflammatory foods as often as I can because that fuels my body.
Where can listeners connect with you and find out more about your work?
Yes, my website is womenscbt.com, women's with an S. And then in Instagram, we do a little posting at womenscbt.
Kelsey, thank you so much for being here in person today and for all the work you do bridging the gap between mental health and medical care.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.